Welcome to a short video summary of our Samsung Q8DN TV review. You can read the full in-depth review of this TV via the link in the description or by clicking the card top right of this video. The written review will cover more details of the TV performance, so be sure to visit AVForums.com to read it all. This is Samsung's second full array local dimming or FALD TV for 2018 and follows on from the success of the flagship Q9FN model. This FALD model was not originally destined for these shores, but Samsung changed their mind recently and the Q8DN now sits alongside the Q8FN and Q8CN, which in the UK are both edge lit. Although looks are obviously subjective, we think the Q8DN is an elegant looking TV. The minimalist approach works really well with a design that is contemporary and easy on the eye. The screen sits on two sculpted feet which slot into the bottom of the panel and lock into position with magnets, so there's no need for screws or bolts to attach them. The screen also has no bezel and there's a 5mm thick metal strip which is on all the edges of the screen and is 20mm deep. The rear of the panel also widens out slightly in a bow shape with a black plastic strip design. But with this screen being full array local dimming, it needs the extra depth for the LED backlight and zones. It may not have the super flat or super thin design, but as we usually watch TVs from the front and on a stand or wall mounted, the depth of the panel shouldn't put anybody off. You should also be able to easily add a soundbar underneath the Q8DN because it sits 80mm above the surface. You can also wall mount using the standard Visa mounting points. The materials used and the overall build quality is excellent, as you would expect at this price point. It looks and feels like a premium model, and the lack of the One Connect box is the only slight disappointment here. The One Connect box is missing with the Q8DN, and as such the connections are on the rear right of the panel. All the connections are sideways facing and are positioned 280mm from the edge of the screen, so it'll be easy to hide the cables from view and not have them poking out the edge of the screen. Connections wise, we have a decent lineup including 4 HDMI 2.0B ports with ARC on HDMI 4, along with 2 USB ports, a digital optical output, a CI slot, LAN port, 2 satellite inputs and a terrestrial antenna port. Cable management is a little bit lacking when compared to other 2018 models, but you can route cables through the rear panel and the legs. With the Q8DN, we're provided with 2 remote controls with a simple black plastic traditional affair with all the buttons and controls you would ever need, and a brushed metal One Remote. The One Remote is a minimalist, sleek affair that is small and has a brushed metal finish. It has a good weight in the hand and feels like a quality item that certainly fits with the price point of the Q8DN. There are very few buttons available, which simplifies and declutters the remote. Samsung has set out to make the Q8DN very easy to use on a day-to-day basis. Picture quality is obviously the most important part of any TV, but being able to use the set and its features are, in our opinion, just as important. Tizen powers the operating system of the Q8, and it's a very easy to use and intuitive smart system. Day-to-day use is also very easy with the Q8, and all your content and devices can be accessed quickly through the homepage. This lays out all your devices and apps in a horizontal launcher bar, and as you highlight them, there's a secondary horizontal bar which opens up to show you the latest content available. From the launcher, you can access notifications, settings, sources, search function, apps, ambient mode, live TV, smart things, and the gallery. The selection of catch-up and video on-demand services is excellent, with most of the major providers also supporting 4K and HDR playback, and you also have a choice of content to purchase through the TV Plus app. As always, we set about finding the best settings out of the box for the picture quality to get close to the industry standards used to master content for TV shows and movies. It's important that at least one picture mode on any consumer TV is set up from the factory to be as close as possible to show the content correctly and as intended. Looking at the grayscale tracking, we can see that for a premium LED LCD TV, the results are a little disappointing. We have a lack of red energy and too much green, pretty much from 20 IRE onwards, which gives whites a bluish cyan tint, which is visible with normal viewing material. Delta E errors are well over the visible threshold of 3, which is why we can see the cyan tint in whites and most images. Gamma, however, does track well to the BT1886 target, and the slight dips are caused by the local dimming system, especially at 10 and 20 IRE, where the panel doesn't have enough time between the measurements to dim quickly enough. In terms of the Rec 709 colour and saturation tracking, we can see the cyan push having its effect on the gamut saturation tracking. This will be corrected with a better white balance calibration, and with that in mind, almost all the desired points from 75% and below will fall into place. The vast majority of viewers will probably not notice this, and again the cinema mode is the only one on the Q8DN that gets close to being accurate. There is a suite of calibration controls on the TV which will allow us to perform a manual calibration for our review testing. Turning to the grayscale tracking first, and we didn't need to touch the 20-point controls as we were able to get perfect results with just the 2-point on this occasion. Delta E errors are all well under 1, which is well below the visible threshold. It'll not always be the case that a panel calibrates as easily as this one, so we do like the fact that we have the flexibility of a 20-point correction if required. Our results here though are perfect. Moving to Rec 709 colour gamut saturation, and we can see that correcting the grayscale has pulled the colour points back to where they should be. We used the CMS to make some slight adjustments to balance out the red saturation results, which are still not perfect but as good as we're going to get them here. Other points were much better with no visible issues present, and luminance results were also excellent. So for SDR content, the Q8DN is now as accurate as we're ever going to get it to the industry standards. It was interesting to see that the Q8DN tracked the PQ EOTF very well in our HDR tests, and it's important to point out that we switched off the contrast enhancer within the menus before running these tests. If you don't switch that off, then the Q8DN does produce a much brighter and less accurate tracking of the EOTF, so keep that in mind. For 1000 nit content, the Samsung tone mapping doesn't roll off until it hits 1000 nits, but with 4000 nit master material it does map it with a gradual roll off, so it doesn't clip out too much highlight detail and it keeps a constant average picture level. Colour saturation tracking isn't quite as accurate, with some errors seen mainly in hue and saturation of the 75% marks. However, the Q8 does a decent job of trying to match the DCI P3 gamut and is just a tad short of covering it 100%. Colour luminance is also good, and Delta E errors are good for HDR content. Despite the results not being bang on in the graph, with actual on-screen film content, we didn't see anything we thought was visibly distracting or not as accurate as possible. We measured the peak brightness of the Q8DN in the most accurate movie mode to be 950 nits, and this remained constant. Even when a 10% window was kept on screen for more than a minute, it never dimmed from that point. Watching the Q8 from a straight on position, we didn't notice any issues with looming or light pooling from the backlight, with nice deep blacks, good shadow detail and excellent colour reproduction. Watching the Q8DN in a normal living room environment with some ambient lighting and a bias light behind the set, we found the performance to be excellent for an LCD TV. It's not perfect, but it certainly performs better than some of the recent competition like the Sony XF90. Watching the Q8DN from dead centre of the screen, you could be forgiven for thinking you were watching an OLED TV given the deep blacks, excellent shadow detail and strong, well saturated colours. The VA panel and direct backlight does work extremely well in these circumstances, and the local dimming for the majority of our viewing also performed to a high standard. It was only in the occasions with tricky scenes, which change contrast quickly, that we felt the dimming was a little slow to keep up. In the instance of the Grand Tour, presenters in the studio and the camera cutting from each during an argument, we did find the dimming began to get lost and pumped between the dark and light settings, which in person was very noticeable, but it was tricky to catch it on camera. For the majority of our testing and the material that we used, the Q8DN did an excellent job with the motion handling. 24 frames per second material was displayed as you would expect it, with no induced judder or additional motion blur other than what is present in the content. Using the built-in video on demand apps, we did notice some obvious judder with the BBC iPlayer content in particular, which seemed to affect all the programs that we viewed. Movie and video content appeared to be fine on other services such as Amazon and Netflix, where we didn't see any such issues. We get the usual suite of motion smoothing and frame interpolation technologies from Samsung on the Q8DN under the Auto Motion Plus settings menu. Here you have a few options, and the TV does shape in the default auto position, which does add soap opera effect to content. You can of course switch this off or use the custom settings to adjust the motion compensation to suit your preferences and without adding any soap opera effect. There's also black frame insertion, which is called LED clear motion, and this works well with just a hint of flicker seen on high contrast content. Using this does slightly darken the image, but not to any great degree, and you shouldn't really worry about it. You can always adjust the backlight to compensate if you desire. Input lag for gaming was around 16 milliseconds, which is excellent for all standards of gamers out there. The Q8DN doesn't come with a fancy soundbar or speaker system attached, but the built-in speakers were surprisingly good for a flat panel TV. We found it to sound quite spacious with a nice soundstage, and it wasn't boxy or muffled like the usual TV systems we test. There was a decent mid-range 2 voices and a nice top end that wasn't harsh or sibilant in any way at normal, reasonable volumes. We found the out-of-the-box picture quality in movie mode to provide the most satisfying image quality of all the presets available. Blacks were deep and fluid with excellent shadow detail, and colours were rich and accurate. Skin tones were natural and lifelike with good facial detail and shadows, adding excellent depth to the image. As you would expect for a Samsung LED LCD TV, the HDR performance out of the box in movie mode is also bright and colourful. Blacks remain excellent with even more shadow detail, and highlights and specular details are bright, but not overly so that they become distracting. Even tricky 4000 nit mastered content such as pan was displayed with confidence and swagger by the Q8DN, with all the highlights visible within a constantly balanced overall image. Sitting dead on with the Q8DN gives you the best performance with little in the way of haloing or other issues that you will see sitting off axis. The Q8DN is undoubtedly a very good LCD TV and has many of the attributes of its bigger brother, the Q9FN, and also some of the foibles that slightly detract from the overall package. Our main concerns are the local dimming being a tad slow in some scenes, and the price. Everything else on this TV is excellent, and as an LCD TV it is up there with the very best of the bunch at this moment in time. At just £300 less than the Q9FN, it does seem to be a little too high given the differences on offer between the two TVs. We also didn't feel that the Q8DN is that much better equipped than the current Sony XF90, as both share a lot of common traits such as FALD backlight with local dimming and 4K HDR that's very similar. The Samsung definitely has the better user interface and operating system with Tizen, yet the Sony is Dolby Vision ready, which the Samsung isn't, and it only costs £1,400 compared to the Q8's £2,199. This is the biggest stumbling point for us, and while the TV does offer enough performance to earn it a recommendation, it comes with that rather large price caveat. We go into far more detail about this TV in our written review on AVForums, so head over there now to check it out. If you've enjoyed this video, then please like and subscribe, and press the notification bell to be told when our next review is live. You can find more reviews, news and articles like this at avforums.com, Europe's largest community for TVs, home cinema, movies, games, tech and gadgets. Thanks for watching.